Going to continue on the guest line this morning. First-time conversation for me with Jay McDaniel. He's the executive director of the Mississippi Gaming Commission. Jay, good morning. Thanks so much for some of your time.
Yeah, good morning, Richard. Good to be on.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in. By the way, if you hear a little bit of knocking in the background, Jay was telling us during the break, he's got some construction going out, but it sounds a little bit like a slot machine when that jackhammer's popping. I feel like that is very fitting to be in the background for this conversation.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I probably should have moved to a different office. It's been miserable, I'll be honest. I'm about to move to our Biloxi office if this keeps up.
I don't blame you at all. There's lots that I want to get into with you this morning, but I think top of mind for most people is the debate, the legislation that appears to once again not really be going anywhere, or not seeing light at the end of the tunnel for mobile sports betting. From your perspective, where are we on that as we move into the final few weeks of this legislative session?
Yeah, I think I read an article on y'all's site. Caleb Sailors called it, on life support, and that's how I would describe it, Richard. The House last year and this year, Representative Uri, who's chair of the gaming committee over there, has passed pretty comprehensive mobile sports betting legislation. Last year, it passed the House overwhelmingly, but did not come out of the Senate gaming committee. Same situation this year. So it did die in committee, but what has happened now is there are two Senate bills that came over to the House Gaming Committee, where the House Gaming Committee inserted the mobile sports into those bills. Their original intent was not that, but now they're in there. So they're still alive with that, from that aspect, but now it's got to go back over, and at some point, someone in the Senate and the House are going to have to sit down and agree to something if we are going to see it pass. What is
the official stance of the Gaming Commission on mobile sports betting?
Yeah, we typically, with any bill, we typically don't get involved because we were created to regulate the industry, not to dictate policy. But we're not trying to block it. What I would say is if they're going to pass it, I want it done right. We're going to regulate it right. We are preparing. I visit with my counterparts in Nevada and New Jersey, Louisiana, and what have you seen that's wrong? What have you seen that's right? And we are just preparing ourselves for the day, if it does pass, that we're going to do it the best we can. So I do think that the House bill that passed had those kind of provisions in it to do it the right way. Some protections in there. I think there's some additional things we would need to do. We'll be tracking things like responsible gaming. Are we seeing increases, in problem gambling? But as far as whether the bill passes or not, we just try and stay out of it. And if the policymakers decide to do it, we're gonna make sure it's done right. I do think, obviously, it needs to be done by our casinos that are already doing it. So I think that in the legislation, that even if you have a DraftKings, they're going to be partnered with a brick and mortar casino. I just think that's the way to do it.
Well, and to me, that's really the fascinating part of the debate. I've talked with some legislators kind of on background to more fully understand this, to understand what the opposition is and, what the pros are on it as well. And I'm wondering from your perspective, and as you've looked at this legislation, is this simply about, do we give Mississippians the opportunity to place a sports bet on their mobile device, or is there more to it? Is there something else going on that is causing some senators or some legislators in the House to go, hold on, we need to make sure that this is right? Do you see there's something else there?
I think there are, multiple factors. I think y'all have done a good job. You've had some of these representatives and senators on, and they've been in the public about why the Senate's against it. I think for the most part, it's been pretty public that I think there's concerns on the Senate side as to, any expansion of gaming. Are we looking at everything? Are we, are all the concerns being addressed? I think at the end of the day, Richard, you have 26 casinos in the state run by 15 different companies, and they are not all aligned on it. And when not everyone is aligned, that seems to muck things up. To be fair, those things need to be looked at. But, if we have an operator that's not for it, why are they not for it? And they're not all the same opinions. There's different reasons. My response to all of that is just, this is the frustrating thing for me as a regulator. The illegal market is getting bigger by the day, and we are doing our best to fight it. But when you talk about tackling offshore illegal operators that can get their apps onto your phone, and if I stop one, two more are going to pop up in its place. I do think the legalization in our state is one of the things that would help tackle that. So if I were to say why we should do it, that would just be one of the major reasons, is that we have an illegal market taking money out of our state with no tax consequences, putting no brick and mortar, anything into our state.
I feel like on a surface level, Mississippians who are either for this or against it are only looking at their user experience, right? Can I grab my phone from my couch and get a little action on a game? But behind the scenes, I had one legislator tell me that there's an issue of data collection that is real in terms of, so Jay, if you're sitting on your couch, the casino that you're betting through, they want your information, and they're going to protect that. But if this goes to one of these national brands like FanDuel or DraftKings, they also want that data. Does that play a role in this as to who gets the data, how much it's protected, whether that revenue stays in Mississippi or ends up, in I don't even know where the headquarters is for those big companies, but in other states?
Yeah, I think that's one of the concerns. I think that's a fair concern that you're hearing out of the Senate is, while you may have a brick and mortar casino that's running the book, you've got this app from an out-of-state, platform, and how much, we would license them, we would have oversight, but we maybe can't control what they do with that data. And they're going to be sending, while you might get a mailer from the borough saying, come visit our property, you'd be getting something from this platform saying, come sign up and do this. So, yeah, it just adds more layers to that. So, yeah, I do think it's a legitimate concern. Again, it's one of those things, though, Richard, where I would rather someone be data collecting with a licensed, someone we can oversee, someone we could revoke their license if they do something wrong, as opposed to Curacao or Costa Rican based business that's going to do who knows what with your information and is using it for other illicit purposes. So, yeah, it is a valid concern. But again, it's something that I hope that our residents aren't using other options, because you don't know what they're doing with your data.
I think one of the most frustrating things for, whether you're talking about state legislation or federal legislation, is you can't just have a bill about one topic. You have other stuff that gets rolled into it as well. And there's been a conversation about tidelands and funding for that, and taking care of things on the Mississippi Gulf Coast that need to be taken care of, and perhaps either holding a bill hostage for that in order to get this done, or trying to roll it all into one. Where does that play into this conversation?
Well, it's a good point. That's kind of where we are. We started the session with separate bills. We had a Tidelands bill.
Lance, did we lose Jay's audio? Or there we go. I'm sorry, Jay. If you could start over on that answer. I lost you just for a second.
Okay, yeah. It was a good point you raised, because you start the session with these independent bills. The bill on the Tidelands Act, which clarifies some language that I think is good. You had the mobile sports betting on the House. You have these independent bills. And then now here we are where they are. They're all bunched together, and if you don't have a compromise, they're going to all die. But yeah, that's definitely where we are right now. The Tidelands bill has the mobile sports betting language in it. There was a Senate Bill 2510 out of the Senate, which I was in favor of that, because it did increase criminal penalties on these illegal operators to felony levels. So that was going to help our efforts. Now mobile sports is in that, and I'm not faulting any. That's just the way sometimes legislation happens. But that's where we are now. It's going to be kind of an all or nothing on those questions, I believe. And maybe it helps. Maybe it helps it get through. But that's pretty much where we are right now.
Yeah. Have you got time to hang through the break? I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
All right. We're visiting with Jay McDaniel. He's the executive director of the Mississippi Gaming Commission. One of the things that I asked one of the legislators that I was talking to, and we'll get to this in just a second, is you understand the need to protect casinos in the state of Mississippi who have invested heavily in their properties. But when we look at this legislation, ultimately, are we taking into account what the people of Mississippi want, or is this just about corporations? We'll talk about that on the other side with Jay McDaniel. He's the executive director of the Mississippi Gaming Commission. You can join the conversation on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. Give your business the edge with gigabit fiber internet from C Spire. Quick timeout. We've got more with you, more with Jay McDaniel from the Mississippi Gaming Commission on the other side of this timeout. Jay McDaniel, the executive director of the Mississippi Gaming Commission, is my guest. And Jay, I was kind of outlining this before the break. I know you heard what I was saying. This is an issue with mobile sports betting, and I'm not being accusatory. I understand that it's part of the process, but this feels like an issue that is being driven by lobbyists as opposed to being driven by legislators with the end user, the consumer, the Mississippian in mind. Do you think legislators are ultimately listening to the people who say, we want this or we don't want this, or is there something else that's driving the conversation far beyond what's best for Mississippians?
I'm going to take Michael Watson's approach and maybe stay away from that one. But I will say this, the legislators, it's difficult because you have constituents that are individuals that want one thing. Some of your constituents are businesses, in your area that look at it a different way. I think there's certainly, they've got to listen to what the people want, and at the same time, what's good for, bringing in economic development to the area. And, if there's a fear that this could hurt one casino while one tells you it's going to help, they've got to weigh those. So it's complicated. I do think at the end of the day, I would tell you, just from the calls I get in my office, it does seem like mobile sports betting is something a lot of consumers want. If you look at the numbers in Louisiana and Tennessee and Arkansas, we were beating them in 2019, 2021, because we were the first ones out of the gate with retail, and our casinos were doing fantastic with it. Since they have opened mobile sports betting in those three states, we've gone down 10 to 15% every year. And so, there comes a point where, the numbers are there, our revenue is declining in sports betting. So you look at everything, what do the constituents want? What are our numbers doing? Are we going to try and make up? Is this one of the areas we want to try and make up revenue while we're talking about, tax revenue? So I just think there's a lot, there's a lot to consider, and I'll just, I'll leave it at that.
That's fair. Jay McDaniel, Executive Director, Mississippi Gaming Commission. You mentioned that some properties are for this, some properties are against this. I think most people know that you have casinos, resorts that are owned by, multinational companies, huge entities, and then you've got some single-owner casinos as well. That are based here in Mississippi, and maybe it's only one property, in some cases a couple of properties. Does that seem to be the dividing line in which properties are for this and which properties are against this legislation? Yeah,
I think this has been publicized some. I think you're right. Obviously, we have major brands. We have MGM, Caesars, Boyd, Bally's, Penn, that all do this across the nation. So, I think if you're a company like that, you're going to take the approach, we're already doing this in Michigan and Maryland and Nevada. Let's do it in Mississippi too. And then when you have operators that this is their only casino or they're regional based, maybe in another state that doesn't have it, it's going to be a difficult haul for them. And their view may be like, I'm fine with my product. I don't want another product that I can't compete with. And so it's just kind of natural that your big national operators are going to be more likely to lean toward this as opposed to a local. But I will say our local operators do a great job with their on-premises products. That's the reason most of them have stayed in business. We have 26 operators in a small population state because they do very well driving business into this state and doing things for this state. And so I think if it were to pass, I have little doubt they could make it work for them. I really do.
You have to have been around for a while to remember this, but casinos in Mississippi have come a long way since Splash opened its doors in Tunica County in, the early mid-'90s. And it was like a glorified trailer with a tent for people to stand under while they were waiting in line to get to the blackjack table. So certainly they're all very professional, very well-run operations. What about tax revenue, though? If you've got a Caesars or an MGM is money that they generate through, if there was mobile sports betting, is that going back to, Nevada, or does that stay in Mississippi?
Yeah, so the tax revenue generated in Mississippi, the tax revenue would absolutely have to stay in Mississippi. It goes into right now. The bill that was first brought up had it going into the roads and bridges, the infrastructure, kind of like what our lottery does. They could earmark it for different things, but it would definitely stay in Mississippi. Now, other revenue, people coming in, basically the profits they generate, some of that goes back to Nevada. We hope they put it back into their property. But that's one thing I will say our operators do a really good job of, is if there's money to reinvest, they want to reinvest it in Mississippi. And so, if you add mobile sports betting, the revenue coming in, where that goes, you would hope would be reinvested in their properties, but definitely the tax revenue goes into our state coffers.
Well, one of the early kind of opposition points that I heard to this was operators were concerned that they wanted to bring people into their brick and mortar locations. And if you legalize mobile sports betting, then those people weren't going to come in, and maybe they weren't going to also hit a slot machine or a blackjack table or eat or get a hotel room. And while I think maybe that issue still exists, I feel like some of them have kind of shifted that and like, okay, these are people that probably weren't coming to the casino, at least not most of them, to place a bet. This is about convenience and perhaps new customers. Have you heard both sides of that argument in conversations with gaming operators?
Yeah, definitely both sides. Some operators have data on that. Caesars operates in Louisiana. They just redid Caesars Palace in New Orleans, and the sports book there is beautiful. This is huge, and I don't think Caesars would have done that if they thought everybody was just going to go to the mobile app. I think have data that has shown, people are going to come in for March Madness, certainly in the Super Bowl. They like the social aspect of it. But then you have others. Again, if you're a smaller operator and you don't have that large sports book and the fun environment, you may not have people come in. But I do think, as you said, Richard, I think there's people out there that want to do this. They're maybe in Tupelo or Oxford and a little too far to go to a casino, and would say, I'm not going anyway, but if you give me this mobile app, I'll do it. And then certainly you have the people in North Mississippi that are driving across into Tennessee doing it, and maybe they'll stop doing that. You have people on the illegal side doing it that maybe will come to the legal market. And then the big one I point to is Alabama doesn't have it. I think you're going to have Alabama people driving into Mississippi to do it. So it's a tough, it's not an easy answer to say, will they, won't they? But at the end of the day, Louisiana is just a good one to look at. They've got both. They have about 10% of their revenue retail, 90% mobile. But that 10% retail is still as much as we do retail. So they didn't just all not do that. You have a combination there. But I think, and that's why I think the projections are pretty high for the revenue here, is that it will be much more than what we see in our retail market.
We had an issue pop up last year, and this has turned into legislation as well, and a debate in the House about a casino in Hinds County in Jackson. And it feels like that produced equal parts interest and angst among people that were out there. Does the Gaming Commission have an official stance on what that might look like, or whether or not you believe that should happen or shouldn't happen?
Definitely not on that one. I will say this, Richard. Okay. We've always been an open market state. We don't limit our licenses. Louisiana does. The fact that you're saying one casino in one specific location, that's definitely changes the game. If the legislature saw fit to do that, there would be reasons to do it. And I think it's purely an economic, they're looking at it from an economic standpoint. Jackson needs something. We believe this casino will help. So I don't like that method of picking one license, and I would certainly not want to be the one sitting here picking who it was. But I do work in Jackson. I understand the desire to bring something in, but at the end of the day, I kind of like our open market system of if you've got the money and the right location, you can do it. So if they did just change simply the location to be in Jackson, that would be one way to look at it. But you've got the Pearl River Resort, you've got the Vicksburg market. They're not gonna take that lying down.
No. Well, and I just wonder if it would set a precedent. I mean, would you have somebody pop up that says, hey, I want to open a sports book at the Lafayette County line so that we catch people that are coming in for an Ole Miss football game on Saturday and they stop in to place a bet on the way to the ball game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a definite fear. Is once you do it here, why not do it in, again, Oxford, Tupelo, Meridian, any state or any city that says, hey, this could help us, why not us? So I think that's why there's a lot more angst against that. And, that didn't even come off of the floor. So,
right.
It's one of those things. If again, I leave that up to the policymakers that are elected to do their job. And if they do it, we'll regulate it like we regulate everyone else. They wouldn't get any special treatment once they're open.
Jay, really appreciate your time. A fascinating conversation, and we'll see where all of this goes, whether it's in this legislative session or in a future one. I look forward to visiting with you again down the line. Thanks so much.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Thanks, Richard.
Jay McDaniel, Executive Director with the Mississippi Gaming Commission, joining us on Mornings with Richard Cross right here on SuperTalk Mississippi. We've got more coming up with you this morning, about half an hour left, and plenty still to talk about, including a pause on tariffs for America's big three operators, automakers. Is this selective or is this wise? We're back right after this.